Hello everybody, welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. Reggae music is one of the most popular, beloved and fastest growing genres of music on the planet. It started out as a ghetto sound that exploded from the beautiful island of Jamaica in the 1960s and reverberated across the four corners of the globe in record time, planting the music and culture firmly in its wake from Africa all the way down to Asia. But before reggae took over the world, its first landing point and soon to be Launchpad was none other than Great Britain, courtesy of its colonial relationship with Jamaica and the influence of the Windrush generation. With the combined factors of music-loving immigrant communities and shrewd businessmen at play, Jamaican music began to swell in popularity at the start of the 1960s, and at the end of that decade had not only caught on like wildfire in the charts, but also used Great Britain as a springboard from where it spread to the rest of Europe and indeed the entire world. Reggae dancehall superstar Barrington Levy once said that the UK is the place where reggae receives the most respect, and when you consider the pivotal role that it's played in promoting, nurturing and inspiring the biggest names in reggae music, you get the idea of what he's talking about. By the 1970s, Britain's love affair with the genre had seen it embrace reggae as part of its inner city culture and had an entire younger generation embrace it as the soundtrack for the struggles of outsiders and underdogs in society, whether black or white, indigene or immigrant. Let's take a look at how Great Britain became reggae's second home and takeoff point for a global takeover. The origin story of reggae in Britain has its roots in the wave of migration of Caribbean people to the UK that started in the late 1940s, popularly referred to nowadays as the Windrush generation. They had settled in inner cities around the country, and by the end of the 1950s, they had formed thriving and populous communities. These folks were often homesick and would organize house parties or dances in public halls. They also longed for music from Jamaica, and by 1960, this demand for music from home had stimulated a thriving record import market, with several companies taking full advantage and making big bucks. The biggest player in this market was the London-based record label named Blue Beat. This company signed distribution deals with some of the biggest producers in Jamaica and became so influential that the genre of ska became known in Britain simply as Blue Beat. These Jamaican immigrants, jamming their music loudly on their speakers, lived in humble neighborhoods where the poor working class English people also lived, and the music caught on with their English neighbors as well. With time, the music became vibrant enough for Blue Beat to even organize a tour for one of its most popular artists in Prince Buster, who would visit the UK in 1962 to a rousing welcome from black and white fans alike. Around that time, a young British Jamaican record label owner was working hard to grow his new label called Island Records. He had signed a couple of artists but was still struggling to get success when he got his breakthrough in 1964. He had discovered a teenage singer called Millie Small. Blackwell brought her to England, where he got her vocal training, packaged her image and recorded her smash hit My Boy Lollipop that went up to number 2 on the UK charts and sold 7 million records. Her huge success brought Jamaican music into the mainstream, opening the door for Desmond Dekker to achieve international success when his song Israelites became the first UK number 1 reggae single in 1969. The floodgates were now open to Jamaican music, with the likes of Max Romeo and Dave and Ansel Collins also achieving mainstream success before the end of the 1960s. Naturally, when there is an opportunity to make money, businessmen will show up to grab it, and new labels like Black Swan and Trojan Records stepped up to get a piece of the action. Trojan Records in particular became one of the UK's foremost record labels. Reggae had truly become a force, but it barely made ripples on television or got any radio airplay. But the magnificent size of the UK reggae movement came to the fore in the form of the Caribbean Music Festival held at the Wembley Stadium in 1970, in which more than 14,000 black, white and Asian people turned up to watch the likes of Toots and the Maytals, Bob and Marcia and Desmond Dekker rock the house. It was the first of its kind in Britain and was celebrated as a watershed moment in the UK's cultural history. Just like it had been in Jamaica in the early 1950s and even 1960s, the media just wasn't paying any attention to reggae, which was essentially music from the ghettos. So it was left to the sound systems to get the sound to the people. The sound system is one of the pillars of reggae culture and became the medium through which the music bypassed the snobbish radio DJs and hit the streets directly. And just like back home in Jamaica, the UK had a vibrant sound system culture that also began with the Windrush generation, when a Jamaican immigrant set up the Duke Vin sound system in 1955, the first in Britain. And by the 1970s, there was a sound system in virtually every major English city, and the likes of Jashaka, Saxon, and Coxsone sound systems became the leaders of the sound system movement and became even more effective in getting the latest records from Jamaica to eager fans and revelers at house parties or sound system events, filling the void in sensational fashion. But aside from the entertainment factor, reggae in the 1970s became a powerful force for expression of the deep frustrations of young people in the chaotic atmosphere of Britain at the time. And motivated by political strife, social alienation, unemployment and poverty, many white working class youth joined the skinhead movement. These skinheads were essentially a counterculture group and became drawn to the other working class outsider subculture that was the underground reggae scene, and they fell in love with the music. Traditionally, the skinheads' music of choice was punk rock. So over time, this love for both genres eventually led to a fusion of reggae and punk rock that became the two-tone movement by the end of the decade. But despite the huge following that reggae had amassed in Britain, it was still a fringe underground scene. But this was all about to change with the visit of an emerging trio of megastars. In 1973, the Wailers visited England to promote their debut album for Island Records in Catch a Fire. The band's presence, plus a slew of devastating concerts and shows, not only blew audiences away, but inspired an entire lineup of British youth to choose a life path as reggae musicians. Eventual UK reggae greats, like the members of Aswad as well as UB40, are just two of many bands whose members had watched the near religious experience and musical charisma of Bob, Peter and Bunny. But the Wailers would stun an entire country with a now legendary performance on BBC Two's All Grey Whistle Test show. This was a show reserved for upcoming rock bands to showcase their talent or lack of. And though not a rock group, Chris Blackwell had promoted the Wailers as something of a rock band to get them on such platforms from where they could be seen. It was a gamble that paid off, as the Wailers delivered a sensational performance that made history as the first reggae band on primetime television in the UK. Chris Blackwell receives plenty of flack for his business dealings, but truth be told, he was one that virtually put reggae on the British and indeed global map. This famous appearance of the Wailers on television sent the entire Caribbean diaspora population into ecstasy and also created millions of new reggae fans from the white population. It's almost impossible to properly capture the impact that the Wailers had on the UK reggae scene, but the fact is, they literally dragged it from the fringes into the mainstream, inspiring an entire generation of eventual homegrown British superstars like Steel Pulse, Aswad, Black Slate, Matumbi and UB40, among many others. In addition to the artists that emerged, reggae in Britain also exploded in popularity due to the tireless hard work of some wonderful media personalities like the great John Peel, who was one of the longest running BBC Radio 1 DJs and a tireless advocate for reggae to be given exposure in popular media. His now legendary show, John Peel Reggae Sessions, introduced the world to so many artists that would never have seen the light of day on British media. Another media figure that played an astonishing role in promoting reggae in Britain is none other than David Rodigan, veteran DJ and sound system operator. Since he began to work as a DJ in 1978, he's campaigned tirelessly for reggae to be accorded its rightful place in the sun, often clashing with the establishment in the process. In 2012, Rodigan famously quit his job at Kiss FM over the marginalization of reggae music. Britain's love for reggae saw it develop its own subgenres, and the first of these is the amazing lovers rock, a style far removed from the political and spiritual admonitions of roots reggae, characterized by soulful songs about love and matters of the heart. As the 70s drew to a close and reggae entered the mainstream, the militant side of the genre had lost a lot of steam, with pop bands like Culture Club achieving success with hybrid pop lovers rock tracks. Even previous roots fire brands like Aswad found commercial success by shifting to lovers rock with their aptly titled 1981 album New Chapter, and they even closed the decade with their first UK #1 hit Don't Turn Around in 1988. This softening of tone was also adopted by UB40 with their smash hit cover album Labour of Love, and by the 1990s, UK reggae was firmly in the grip of lovers rock and several indigenous subgenres like jungle, dubstep and garage, with only a few UK artists like Steel Pulse still on the roots reggae grind, reminding the world of the heydays of 1970s roots reggae. But despite the seeming decline in UK homegrown roots reggae, the UK still remains one of the most vibrant reggae hubs in the world, with a strong culture of reggae clubs, events, and international reggae music festivals that continue to attract huge numbers of attendees that flood venues to enjoy the best of reggae music from A-list artists and elite sound systems. The influence of reggae music on Britain is one of the greatest phenomenons of the 20th century. Its impact in the 1970s opened up what was generally a fairly conservative society, boosted race relations, and created several subgenres of music which have now taken on lives of their own. Jamaica may have been the birthplace of reggae music, but Great Britain will always be its second home and biggest supporter. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, God bless.